Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. I don't care what anyone says. Loyalty is the currency of the streets. It's worth more than money, more than power. Without it, you're just another punk waiting to get stabbed in the back. That's what I believed for as long as I've been running with the set. That morning started like any other, a meetup at the warehouse to lay down plans for the day. But by the time the sun set, everything I thought I knew about loyalty, about survival, was dead. Maybe I should have seen the signs. The streets weren't just quiet, they were hollow. A silence that didn't belong in our part of the city. I'm Javier Morales, but everyone calls me Jay. Born and raised in East Side Heights, a place where survival means sticking to the code. Never snitch, never falter, and never leave your crew. The gang, our gang, was family, and I'd done my share to prove my loyalty over the years. That day, though, that's when the rules of the game changed, and the stakes went from life and death to something worse. It started when I noticed the streets were empty. No rival colors tagging up the corners, no kids running hustles, no cops shaking down the usual suspects. Just the kind of stillness that makes your skin crawl. Like when you know someone's watching but you can't see them. "Yo, Jay," Rico called from across the lot. "You coming in or what?" Rico was all wiry energy. His hands never still, always flipping a butterfly knife or rolling a blunt. He was posted up by the door to our warehouse where we'd been running operations for the last year. "Yeah, I'm coming," I said, pulling my hoodie tighter against the early morning chill. My sneakers crunched on the gravel as I crossed the yard, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence. Inside, the warehouse smelled like stale beer, weed, and oil. The crew was there, half a dozen heads spread out, talking about turf and deals. Rico slapped me on the back as I came in. "You're late, bro." "Had to check on the block," I said, grabbing a chair and flipping it backward. "Something's off today. Streets are dead quiet." "Maybe the pigs are planning something," Angel muttered, leaning back against a stack of crates. He always thought every shadow was a setup. "Or maybe they're scared," Rico said with a smirk. "They know Eastside runs this place." I didn't say anything. Something gnawed at me, a sense of wrong I couldn't shake. I kept scanning the room, my gut telling me to stay alert. That's when Jorge stumbled in, clutching his arm, his face pale as a ghost. He'd been part of a crew we sent to collect from a deadbeat across town. His blood-smeared shirt and glassy-eyed look stopped the room cold. "What happened?" Angel jumped up, grabbing Jorge by the shoulders. "You get hit?" No, Jorge stammered. "It wasn't. I don't know, man. It's crazy out there." "Start talking," I said, my tone harder than I intended. Jorge was tough, one of the guys you could count on in a fight, but he looked wrecked, like he'd seen something that didn't make sense. "We rolled up on 23rd, right? Place was empty, no lights, no people. But then, this guy came out of nowhere, stumbling like he was wasted. We told him to back off, but he just kept coming, all wild-eyed and crazy. Ray tried to shove him and..." Jorge's voice cracked. "The guy bit him, just latched on like a dog." "What?" Rico said, leaning forward. "You're saying some crackhead bit Ray?" "Not just bit him," Jorge said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Tore his throat out, and then Ray got back up." "You've got to be kidding me," Angel said, shaking his head. "You're saying Ray's dead?" Jorge nodded, his hands trembling. "Not just dead, he turned into one of them, like that dude. They don't stop, man, they don't stop." The room went silent. I felt my stomach drop as I processed Jorge's words. Whatever this was, it wasn't normal. It wasn't some gang beef or bad batch of dope. It was something else. "All right," I said, standing up. "We're locking this place down. Rico, Angel, get the shutters closed. Jorge, sit tight. We'll figure this out." Rico grumbled but did as I said, pulling the heavy steel shutters down over the windows while Angel double-checked the locks. I grabbed a tire iron from the tool bench and scanned the room again, the unease in my gut growing stronger. We didn't get far before the first scream echoed through the warehouse. It came from the back room where we kept the supplies, and it wasn't just a scream. It was the kind that makes your blood run cold, the sound of someone who knows they're about to die. We ran toward it, weapons drawn, but what we saw when we got there froze us in our tracks. Benny, one of the younger kids in our crew, was convulsing on the floor, blood pooling around him. Over him was Ray, or at least what used to be Ray, his face smeared with blood, his teeth gnashing as he tore into Benny's throat. "Ray," Angel whispered, his voice shaking. Ray's head snapped up, his eyes clouded over, his mouth twisted into a snarl. He lunged at us, moving faster than anyone should with a body that mangled. Instinct took over. Rico swung his bat, catching Ray in the shoulder and sending him sprawling. But he didn't stay down. He came at us again, unrelenting, his mouth snapping at the air like a wild animal. "Hit him again," I shouted, raising my tire iron. It took all three of us to put Ray down, and even then it wasn't easy. His body twitched and jerked long after we caved his skull in. We stood there panting, bloodied and shaken. "What is this?" Angel asked, his voice trembling. Nobody had an answer. Behind us, Jorge groaned, collapsing to his knees. His hand clutched his arm where blood seeped through his fingers, and I knew, deep down, that whatever happened to Ray, Jorge was next. This wasn't the life we signed up for, but it was the one we were stuck in now. The silence after Ray's death was suffocating, broken only by Jorge's labored breathing. The warehouse felt less like a sanctuary and more like a tomb waiting to be filled. My mind raced. Ray was one of our strongest. Seeing him go down like that, no hesitation, no fear in his eyes, just hunger. Whatever this was, it wasn't just survival of the fittest anymore. It was survival against something that shouldn't exist. "Jay," Rico said, his voice trembling for the first time I could remember. "What's the plan?" I swallowed hard, trying to steady my thoughts. "First, we keep Jorge stable. Angel, grab the med kit from the back room. Rico, check every door and window again. I don't want a single crack open." Rico nodded and bolted to the front. Angel hesitated, glancing at Jorge, who was now slumped against a crate, pale and sweating. "Jay, you don't think he's... like Ray?" I couldn't meet Angel's eyes. "Just get the med kit, we're not losing anyone else today." Angel left, and I crouched next to Jorge. His eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. "Jay, I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to bring this back here." "It's not your fault," I said, gripping his shoulder. But even as I said it, I felt the dread creeping in. The bite on his arm was deep, the flesh torn and jagged. Blood seeped through the makeshift bandage, dark and viscous. I'd seen wounds like that before, from knife fights, from dog attacks, but this felt different, like the wound itself was alive. Angel returned with the med kit, and we worked together to clean and bandage Jorge's arm. He winced and groaned, but at least he was still conscious, for now. "We need to figure out what's going on out there," Rico said, rejoining us. "The streets are empty, but the phones are dead. No sirens, no helicopters, nothing. It's like the whole city just stopped." "Or turned," Angel muttered. Rico shot him a glare. "Don't start with that. We don't know anything yet." I stood, wiping my hands on my jeans. "We're not going to sit here waiting for answers. We need intel, supplies, and a plan." Angel looked at me like I was crazy. "Go out there? Are you serious after what just happened with Ray?" "I don't like it either," I admitted. "But if this isn't just a bad trip or some disease, we need to know. Otherwise, we're just sitting ducks." Rico smirked, a hint of his usual cockiness returning. "Fine by me. I've been itching to crack some skulls anyway." "We're not picking fights," I said sharply. "We move quiet, we move fast, and we don't split up. Angel, you're staying here with Jorge." Angel opened his mouth to protest but stopped when Jorge coughed violently, doubling over in pain. I met Angel's eyes and he nodded reluctantly. "All right, but you better come back." Rico and I grabbed what we could, bats, crowbars, and a flashlight. I slipped a knife into my waistband, its weight comforting even though I wasn't sure it would be enough. The warehouse felt too quiet as we stepped out, the air heavy with tension. The streets outside were worse than I expected. Cars sat abandoned, doors flung open like their owners had run for their lives. Trash littered the sidewalks, but there were no signs of life. No barking dogs, no distant music, just an oppressive, unnatural silence. "Where is everybody?" Rico muttered, his voice low. I didn't answer. My eyes scanned every shadow, every corner, waiting for movement. We headed toward the main drag, hoping to find answers or at least supplies. As we passed a boarded-up bodega, something crashed inside, followed by a low, guttural growl. "You hear that?" Rico whispered, gripping his bat tightly. "Yeah, keep moving," I said, my pulse quickening. Whatever was in there, I didn't want to find out. We reached the intersection at 24th and Main and stopped cold. Bodies littered the street, twisted and broken, like they'd been torn apart by wild animals. Blood streaked the pavement, dark and sticky, and the smell hit me like a punch to the gut. "Oh man," Rico said, gagging. "What did this?" Before I could answer, a figure stumbled out from behind a wrecked car. Its movements were jerky and unnatural, its head lolling to one side. Its clothes were soaked with blood, and when it looked up, its eyes were empty, hollow, like rays. "Stay back," I said, raising my crowbar. The thing let out a guttural snarl and charged, faster than anything that Broken should have been able to move. Rico swung first, the bat connecting with a sickening crack. The thing staggered but didn't fall. "Hit it again!" I shouted, driving my crowbar into its side. It let out a wet, gurgling sound but kept coming, its hands clawing at the air. It took both of us to put it down, our weapons smashing into its skull until it finally stopped moving. We stood there panting, blood splattered across our clothes. "What are these things?" Rico said, his voice shaking. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that the rules had changed, and if we didn't adapt fast, we wouldn't make it through the night. The blood on my crowbar was already starting to dry, turning a dark, crusty red. I stared at it as Rico paced in tight circles, his bat still gripped tightly. The thing we just killed shouldn't have been able to move like that. It shouldn't have been alive or undead. Whatever it was. "Jay," Rico said, his voice breaking the heavy silence, "this isn't just about surviving the streets anymore. This is, something else." I nodded, still catching my breath. "We need to get back to Angel and Jorge. If there's more of those things out here, we can't leave them alone for long." "You sure that's the move?" Rico asked, gesturing toward the bodies littering the street. This isn't going to stay in one place. Whatever's going on, it's spreading. Fast." "I know," I said, gripping my crowbar tighter. "But we're not splitting up. We bring Angel and Jorge with us if we have to." We took a different route back to the warehouse, avoiding the intersection where we'd just fought the creature. The eerie silence hung over everything, broken only by the occasional moan or shuffling sound from the shadows. Every corner felt like a trap waiting to spring. I glanced at Rico, whose usual cocky grin was nowhere to be found. For once, he looked scared. When we reached the warehouse, I rapped on the metal door in our usual rhythm. Nothing, no response. My heart sank as I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. "Angel, open up!" Rico shouted, his voice strained with panic. The sound of scraping metal made us both jump. The door cracked open just enough for Angel's face to appear, pale and wide-eyed. "Get in," he whispered hoarsely, pulling the door open just enough for us to slip inside. The warehouse felt darker than before, like the walls were closing in. Jorge was lying on the ground near a stack of crates, his breathing shallow and raspy. Angel shut the door quickly, bolting it with trembling hands. "What happened?" I asked, kneeling next to Jorge. His skin was pale, almost gray, and sweat dripped from his forehead. The bandage on his arm was soaked through with blood. Angel looked at me, his eyes hollow. "He's getting worse, Jay. I don't know what to do." I pressed a hand to Jorge's forehead. It was burning up. His eyes fluttered open, and he looked at me like he was trying to say something but couldn't find the words. "We need a real medic," I said, standing. There's no way he's making it through the night like this. And where are we going to find one? Angel snapped. The city's empty. You saw what's out there. Those things aren't going to let us waltz into a hospital. We don't have a choice, I said, my voice harder than I intended. If we stay here, Jorge's dead and we might be next. Rico nodded reluctantly. Jay's right. We need to move. Angel, help him up. Angel hesitated, but he crouched down and threw one of Jorge's arms over his shoulder. Jorge groaned weakly as they lifted him. Where are we even going? Angel asked. There's a clinic on 18th, I said. If we're lucky, it hasn't been cleared out yet. And if it has? Rico asked, raising an eyebrow. I didn't answer. I couldn't. We moved cautiously through the streets, sticking to the shadows. The sound of Jorge's labored breathing felt like a beacon, drawing attention with every step. I scanned every alley, every parked car, every shattered window, waiting for something to lunge at us. When we reached the clinic, the front doors were shattered, glass crunching under our feet as we stepped inside. The air smelled stale, like blood and disinfectant. Broken furniture and overturned medical carts were scattered everywhere, but the place was eerily quiet. Stick together, I whispered, motioning for Rico to take the lead. Angel and I followed close behind, Jorge sagging between us. Every step felt like walking into a trap. We found the supply room near the back, the door hanging off its hinges. Inside, shelves were ransacked, but a few supplies remained. Bandages, antiseptic, and a couple of bottles of antibiotics. It wasn't much, but it was something. This will have to do, Angel said, stuffing the supplies into his bag. Let's get out of here. As we turned to leave, a low growl echoed through the hallway. My blood ran cold as I spun around, crowbar at the ready. The sound grew louder, followed by shuffling footsteps. From the shadows, two figures emerged. Jay, Rico said, gripping his bat. We've got company. Stay behind me, I said, stepping forward. Angel, keep Jorge out of the way. The first creature lunged, its movements fast and erratic. I swung the crowbar, the metal connecting with its jaw in a sickening crunch. It fell but scrambled to get back up, its body twisting in ways that defied logic. Go for the head, Rico shouted, bringing his bat down on the second one. Blood sprayed as the creature's skull caved in, but it kept clawing at him until a second swing put it down for good. The first one was back on its feet, snarling as it charged at me again. I drove the crowbar into its temple, feeling the resistance as bone cracked under the force. It collapsed, twitching before finally going still. We need to go, I said, panting. Now. Angel nodded, helping Jorge to his feet as Rico and I kept watch. The hallway was silent again, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. Whatever these things were, they were everywhere, and they weren't stopping. We stepped back into the street, the clinic fading into the distance as we moved as fast as Jorge could manage. The city felt even more desolate now. The shadows deeper, the silence heavier. I kept my crowbar in hand, my knuckles white as I scanned the darkness. This isn't just about surviving, I said quietly, more to myself than anyone else. This is about fighting back. We didn't make it far from the clinic before things started to unravel. The weight of Jorge, half-conscious and slipping deeper into fever, slowed us down. Angel bore most of his weight, sweat dripping from his forehead as he gritted his teeth and powered through. Rico and I kept flanking them, scanning every alley and corner for signs of movement. The streets were darker now, the weak streetlights flickering against the encroaching night. Every sound felt amplified, the shuffling of our feet, Jorge's ragged breathing, the faint groans that seemed to drift from all directions. The silence between us grew heavier with each step, but I knew everyone was thinking the same thing. We weren't going to make it like this. Jay, Angel hissed, breaking the quiet. We need to stop, he's burning up. I looked at Jorge. His head hung low, his eyes barely open. The bandages on his arm were soaked through, and his breathing was shallow. He wasn't just burning up, he was fading. We can't stop here, I said, keeping my voice low. We're too exposed. Rico swung his bat absently, his frustration evident. Then where, Jay? He's not going to last much longer. I glanced around, my eyes settling on an old convenience store across the street. The windows were barred, and the metal gate on the front door looked mostly intact. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than standing out in the open. "There," I said, pointing to the store. "We'll hold up there for now." We moved quickly, Rico reaching the door first. He tugged at the gate, the rusted metal screeching as it slid open. Angel and I shuffled in with Jorge while Rico held the door. Once inside, we pushed a shelf against the entrance for added security. The store was dim, the faint glow of a broken emergency light casting eerie shadows across the shelves. Most of the food and supplies had been looted, but the place was quiet. "Set him down," I said, clearing a spot on the floor. Angel eased Jorge down and I knelt beside him, pressing a hand to his forehead. He was burning up worse than before, and his breathing was shallow and uneven. "We need to cool him down," Angel said, his voice desperate. "We can't just sit here and watch him die." I rifled through the bag of supplies we'd grabbed from the clinic, pulling out the antibiotics and antiseptic. "This is all we have," I said. "It's not much, but it's something." Angel nodded, helping me clean and redress the wound on Jorge's arm. The sight of the bite made my stomach turn. The flesh around it was discolored, dark veins spreading out like cracks in concrete. Whatever this infection was, it wasn't normal. "Rico," I said, looking up, "keep watch. If anything comes near you, let us know." He nodded, gripping his bat and heading toward the front of the store. Angel and I worked in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Jorge's breathing grew fainter with each passing minute, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were losing him. Then came the first bang. Rico spun around, his eyes wide. "They're here," he said, his voice low but urgent. I scrambled to my feet, gripping the crowbar tightly. The banging grew louder, coming from the barred windows and the front gate. Shadows moved outside, their jerky, unnatural motions illuminated by the flickering streetlights. "How many?" Angel asked, his voice trembling. "Too many," Rico said. "We've got to move." "We can't move Jorge like this," I said, my mind racing. "If we go out there now, we're dead." The banging turned into pounding, the metal gate rattling violently as the creatures outside pushed against it. The barred windows groaned under the pressure. It wouldn't hold for long. "We need to draw them away," Rico said, stepping forward. "I'll do it." "Are you crazy?" Angel snapped. "You go out there and you're not coming back." "If we stay here, none of us are," Rico shot back. He turned to me, his expression resolute. "Jay, you get them out the back. I'll lead these things down the block." I stared at him, my chest tightening. Rico wasn't just my crew. He was my brother in all the ways that mattered. The thought of losing him hit harder than I expected. "Rico?" I started, but he cut me off. "No arguments," he said firmly. "This is the only way." He didn't wait for a response. Before I could stop him, Rico swung the gate open and stepped outside, his bat resting on his shoulder. The creatures turned toward him instantly, their snarls echoing in the night. "Come on, you ugly freaks," Rico shouted, slamming his bat against a nearby car to get their attention. The noise was deafening, and the creatures surged toward him like a wave. "Jay!" Angel's voice snapped me back to reality. "The back door." I grabbed Jorge, slinging one of his arms over my shoulder as Angel did the same on the other side. Together we dragged him toward the back of the store, the sound of Rico's shouts and the creature's snarls fading behind us. The back door led into a narrow alley cluttered with trash and debris. We moved as quickly as we could, the weight of Jorge slowing us down. My mind raced with 100 thoughts, but one kept rising above the rest. Rico. I didn't look back. I couldn't. We turned a corner and found ourselves in a quieter stretch of the city. The sounds of chaos were distant now, but the weight of what we'd left behind lingered heavily. Angel and I set Jorge down against a wall, both of us breathing hard. "He's not going to make it," Angel said quietly, his voice breaking. "Not like this." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My chest felt hollow, the loss of Rico hitting harder than I wanted to admit. For the first time since this started, I felt truly lost, but we couldn't stop. Not yet. The silence of the alley was deceptive. Even as we sat there catching our breath, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching. Jorge leaned heavily against the wall, his head lolling to the side, his breath shallow and uneven. Angel sat beside him, staring down at the ground, his hands trembling as he wiped sweat from his face. "What now, Jay?" Angel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can't keep dragging him like this. He's going to turn. You've seen it." I didn't answer right away. My eyes darted to Jorge's arm, where the infection had spread further. The veins around the bite were blackened, crawling up toward his shoulder. It looked like a spider's web, tangled and growing with every passing minute. I knew Angel was right, but saying it out loud would make it real. "We need to get somewhere safe," I said finally. "Somewhere we can figure out what to do next." "Safe?" Angel let out a bitter laugh. "There's no such thing anymore. Not with those zombies everywhere." That word hung in the air like a curse. Zombies. I'd avoided thinking of them that way, hoping it was something else. A disease, a drug, something explainable. But there was no denying it now. Those things weren't human anymore. The sound of a distant moan broke through my thoughts. Angel shot to his feet, his eyes wide. "They're coming." "Help me get Jorge up," I said, grabbing Jorge's arm. Angel hesitated for a moment before sighing and bending down to lift him. We staggered to our feet and started moving down the alley, our steps quick but unsteady. The moans grew louder, echoing off the walls and making it impossible to tell where they were coming from. The alley opened onto a main street and we froze. Dozens of zombies were shuffling through the intersection, their jerky movements and guttural sounds sending chills down my spine. Some dragged their feet while others twitched violently, their heads snapping toward any sound or movement. "Back," I whispered, pulling Angel and Jorge into the shadows. We pressed ourselves against the wall, holding our breath as the zombies passed. One of them stopped, its head tilting unnaturally as it sniffed the air. My grip tightened on the crowbar, sweat dripping down my temple. Angel's hand clutched my arm. "Jay," he whispered, "we can't do this." I glanced at him, seeing the fear in his eyes. "We don't have a choice," I said. "Stay quiet." The zombie let out a low growl, turning its head toward us. My heart pounded as I raised the crowbar, ready to strike. But before it could take another step, a loud crash echoed from somewhere down the street. The zombie's head snapped toward the sound, and it shuffled away, followed by the rest of the horde. "What was that?" Angel asked, his voice shaking. "Don't know," I said, lowering the crowbar. But we're not sticking around to find out. We moved quickly, sticking to the shadows as we made our way down the street. The city felt like a graveyard, every building dark and lifeless. The occasional moan or shuffle reminded us that we weren't alone, but for now, we managed to stay ahead of the danger. We found shelter in an old auto repair shop. The windows were boarded up, and the heavy metal doors gave us a sense of security, even if it was fleeting. Inside, the air was stale and filled with the faint smell of oil and rust. We laid Jorge down on a workbench, his breathing barely audible. "We've got to talk about this," Angel said, his voice breaking. "He's not going to make it, Jay, and if he turns while we're here..." I held up a hand, cutting him off. "We're not giving up on him. Not yet." "And what if it's too late?" Angel's voice rose, his fear and frustration boiling over. "What if we're just waiting for him to kill us?" I didn't have an answer. I looked at Jorge, his face pale and slick with sweat. He was fighting, but for how much longer? I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't bring myself to let him go. Not after everything we'd been through. The sound of something scraping against the metal door snapped us both out of it. Angel grabbed a wrench from the table, his hands trembling as he held it like a weapon. I motioned for him to stay back as I crept toward the door, my crowbar at the ready. The scraping grew louder, followed by a low growl. My grip tightened as I reached the door, peering through a small crack in the boards. A single zombie stood outside, its milky eyes staring blankly ahead as it clawed at the metal. Its fingers left streaks of blood and grime on the surface, and its mouth hung open in a grotesque snarl. I turned to Angel. "It's just one," I whispered. "I can take it out." "Be careful," he said, his voice barely audible. I opened the door just enough to slip outside, the crowbar raised high. The zombie turned toward me, letting out a guttural snarl as it lunged. I swung hard, the metal connecting with its skull with a sickening crack. It collapsed to the ground, twitching once before going still. Breathing heavily, I dragged the body away from the door, tossing it into the shadows. The streets were quiet again, but I knew it wouldn't last. I slipped back inside, locking the door behind me. "We're running out of time," I said, looking at Angel. "We need a plan." Before Angel could respond, Jorge let out a sharp, strangled groan. We both turned to see him convulsing on the workbench. His eyes shot open, now clouded with the same milky haze as the zombie outside. His body jerked unnaturally as a guttural snarl escaped his lips. "Jay!" Angel screamed, backing away. I didn't think. I couldn't. Jorge lunged and I swung the crowbar instinctively. The blow connected with his shoulder, knocking him back, but he scrambled to his feet, his movements inhumanly fast. Angel grabbed the wrench and joined me, both of us swinging as Jorge, our friend, attacked. The final blow came from Angel, his wrench smashing into Jorge's head. Jorge fell, his body twitching before going still. The shop fell silent except for our ragged breathing. "He's gone," Angel whispered, dropping the wrench. "He's really gone." I knelt beside Jorge's body, my hands trembling. There wasn't time to grieve. Not here, not now. "We need to move," I said, standing. "Grab what you can." As we stepped outside, dawn was breaking, casting a faint light over the wrecked city. In the distance, a military convoy lay destroyed, its vehicles smoldering. We approached cautiously, finding weapons and supplies scattered among the wreckage. I picked up a rifle, its weight unfamiliar but reassuring. Angel strapped on a shotgun, his face set with grim determination. We stood there, armed and ready, the first light of day breaking over the horizon. "We're not running anymore," I said, my voice firm. "We fight." Angel nodded, and together we turned toward the city, ready to face whatever came next.